And go ahead.
I tend to think of myself predominantly as an actor. That is why I got into writing and directing and producing. But over time, that obviously has shifted the more I've written and directed. So I like to think of myself now as a multi-hyphenate. That tends to be the term that I use. And I don't think we should be boxed into one particular area of this industry. I think that is a failing of the industry, to say someone is labelled an actor or a writer or a director, because bottom line, we're all creatives. And that is what is the most important thing. And I think we should have permission to step between all the different creative roles that are available to us. It only makes us better in each individual role if we understand the whole. My name is Sally McLean, and I'm based in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, Caris.
How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I love that the shoe is on the other foot, that I'm up earlier, you're up later, instead of what our usual thing is, where now you're getting to direct me. Oh my goodness, I'm loving this.
Okay.
No, I'm very well. Thank you for asking. I am great. And the sun is shining here finally again in Melbourne. So that's lovely to see blue sky out my window, which is always a good thing.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, we're so happy to have you and to have you be a part of this discussion. You have been a celebrated actor, storyteller, director, filmmaker for many years in many different circuits around the globe. And I love what you said at the beginning of your storytelling and what you consider yourself to be, and not slotting people into one thing, because I do think it is limiting as well. And I think the next good thing to ask you is, what do you think the importance of female voices is in this time, both from the storytelling standpoint and from the standpoint of like strict written story and directing?
Yeah, this is a conversation that I really wish we didn't have to keep having, but we do, because we do need to. I think everybody who has a story in them, and that's, quite a few people on this planet, if not everybody, but everybody who chooses to go into this industry and be a storyteller is important and valid. But I think women do have a different perspective on the world. We just do. And I think our voices, therefore, and our stories deserve to share that space on the stage as much as other voices that have dominated the industry for a very long time have. I think we bring a different perspective, we bring a different experience. And if you're not a woman, you're not going to have that experience. It's just bottom line. It's just not how it's going to work out. Our perspectives all come from our lived experience. Female perspective tends to cover a lot of ground and a lot of different experiences as well. And I think that's the other problem that we face with storytelling for women, is this thing that there's kind of a box again that we're supposed to fit into with the stories that we're supposed to be telling.
And that's more, and I didn't mean to throw you with that first question, because it is a question where, I think Nora Ephron said many years ago, do we need to have another female filmmaker panel with that same question? And that was, so I'm glad you're pointing out, it's not the triteness of the question, which we know the answer is, well, of course they're important. But it is, as you were starting to say, at this time, and that people think there's a certain story that we're supposed to be telling. So continue with what you're saying there.
So I started storytelling as a very young child, but I was dyslexic. So reading wasn't my strongest suit at that point. I've got many coping techniques now and it's fine. But when I was very small, not so much. So I would make up my own stories. That's how I would amuse myself. And they were not stories about little girls playing with their dolls or anything like that. I had swashbuckling pirates, I had witches, I had magic, I had kings and queens and dragons and all that stuff, which would have been seen as a boy thing. at the time, but it wasn't. They were just really exciting stories, and my imagination went that way. And it was an interesting thing to grow up. I mean, I wrote my first script when I was probably 15, I think. I wrote a feature film, which I actually, there's no record of it. I gave it to a friend to look after because I'd heard this thing you weren't supposed to keep scripts in the one place or whatever for valuables because you might lose them or whatever. So I gave it to a friend for safekeeping. He promptly forgot about it, left it sitting around the lounge room, and his mother used it for kindling for their fireplace.
No, no, someone
that was gone.
It's a major MGM feature is what happened. So
right. That first film could have been amazing. But again, that film from memory was, again, it was involving fantasy. I mean, I loved fantasy novels when I was finally reading, and I devoured fantasy and sci-fi novels. It was all considered stuff that, you know, boys would be into. But I didn't see it that way. As far as I was concerned, stories don't have gender. They will have a gender perspective, of course, but stories themselves don't have gender. You know, there are so many women I know who are madly into things like Dungeons and Dragons and video games and all this stuff. It's actually, and that's the thing, I think Nora Ephron's comment, it's about, we don't just tell the chick flick stories, you know, it's not just, we can do that, of course, because that is part of our lived experience. And there are some brilliant films written by women and stories written by women that fit that genre. But there are just as many that are involving things like major stunts and huge adventure. And I mean, Caris, you're a good example of that with Pepper Project.
oh,
I mean, that's fascinating and really interesting because it's a really brilliant female lead telling a female story, but in what's seen as a traditionally male kind of environment.
exactly.
And I think that is what's so exciting, is that there is this, we're not defined. The stories we tell should not be defined by our gender.
Exactly. Thank you. That's excellent continuation of that point. And you know, jumping off from there, where do you get your stories from? What sparks your ideas as a creator? And you can launch into how you develop the amazing award-winning series Shakespeare Republic, or any other work that you've done. You know, I'm just curious as to what happened to get these things going for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now, I went to drama school in London, and until then, I hadn't really, even though I wrote poetry till the cows came home, and I had written this feature script and had dabbled in a couple of novels and that kind of stuff. I never really saw myself as a writer, and it wasn't until I was at drama school in London, and they actually said, "Get good at creating your own work." Because you're going to graduate and the phone won't automatically ring. It's not how it works. And right. And it was good advice. So I actually thought, well, why not? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a script and see how it goes. So my first produced piece was a film called A Little Rain Must Fall. And it was right about what you know. So it was set in a household of 5 girls who were sharing a house in London. And the day-to-day dramas of their lives. And then I went, let's put in a bit of a twist because it's a bit boring. So then I killed one of them in the story. Oh. And then it was all the grief around this person who had a drug overdose. That was essentially the story. Now, I hadn't lived that. I need to be clear. Luckily, none of my friends have done that. But it was a case of going, this is boring. There's nothing for them to be overcoming. So that's why I put that in there. And I gave it to a friend who went, I really like this. Let's make it. And I was like, okay. And I didn't direct that one. We got another director. And so we had basically from page to finished project, it was about 12 months, which was crazy. I don't know how we did it. And we shot it in London and borrowed a friend's house and all that stuff and pulled in friends from drama school and all the rest. Did that film do anything? Not really, but it was a great learning curve. And then I realized, okay, well, I've written about a slice of life drama. What else could I write? So my next script, talk about going from very simple to crazy. The next script, which I still have and I am still trying to get produced, which is a feature film, is set in the 11th century in Scotland and contemporary and has sci-fi and fantasy and gods and goddesses and an archaeological dig and the whole 9 yards. Hasn't been made, unfortunately. Yet, that's right. It's still sitting there. But that was, again, another great writing experience, went from one extreme to the other. And I think for me, it was a case of where the ideas came from. Well, first, as I said, what I was living to a degree. Second was what I loved. And I loved all of the mystery around. And look, my surname's McLean, so there is a Celt background connection.
Of course.
I'd gone to Scotland to where the clan's seat was, the castle, and had fallen in love with that area and just got inspired by that environment. And that's where Downey is the name of the film. That's where that came from. And then we moved forward to Shakespeare Republic, and that literally came out of I've done it. There's a feature-length doco that's now in post-production that I'd done that was inspired by basically by my mother and people around her. She's an Olympian, and so it was about her coach who'd coached Roger Bannister to break the 4-minute mile. And I was like, this is a really interesting story no one's told. So that was that inspiration. But Shakespeare Republic came about because I'd got to the point with the doco where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to do something fun. What the hell? And yeah, Shakespeare Republic was an experiment. So I was playing with Shakespeare, and it was an idea that had come. I mean, I happened to have worked at the BBC in London in production in between my drama training, and I worked in documentaries. But we also worked in music and arts. So I had a lot of influence around the music and arts world from incredibly talented people. And I'd always wanted to do bite-sized Shakespeare because being again dyslexic, I hadn't really embraced Shakespeare till I got to drama school. And then I had to have a brilliant Shakespeare teacher who I don't know, suddenly I went from not really getting it to being an absolute convert, right?
Yeah.
And could read it. I can actually read Shakespeare better than contemporary English, which is bizarre, but that is what happened. So I really wanted to give that to other people because I know a lot of actors struggle, particularly with Shakespeare. So the bite-sized Shakespeare thing, my honorary patron for my production business at the time was Sir Nigel Hawthorne, who is a beautiful human and not with us anymore, sadly. But of course, a very, very well-known Shakespearean actor in England. And I'd said to him, can I do a bite-sized Shakespeare thing? Do you think that would work? And his comment was, it's brilliant, but there's no home for that. And so the idea, there really wasn't at the time. We didn't have web series. It didn't exist at that point. You could either do little idents for things like the BBC that would just be put up and just put there and as things in between programs, or that was it. So anyway, as a result of that, the idea for Shakespeare Republic came about because of technology, because web series suddenly existed. And this idea that had been sitting there germinating for such a long time about bite-sized Shakespeare. And so it was an experiment. I still call it the experiment. Can we do this? What will happen? Let's see. And it was taken from initially just taking those pieces that I'd always thought about, putting them on screen and seeing if it worked. And then, of course, it did luckily work. People liked it. So then we had to keep going. So then it was a case of what commentary can I make about the world around me through these characters? How can I contemporize these Shakespeare characters as far as setting goes, yet still remain true to the text? So the text has to be as written, but the characters have to be in the 21st century. Quite amazing to see how much Shakespeare had to say that still is relevant for today. But that was what it was. So I got inspired by socio-economic issues, political issues, quite a bit, commentary on human nature. And so I started to pull ideas from just everywhere. And that's kind of how it works. I think, and I
brilliant,
think
really brilliant. You know that.
Right?
Series, yeah.
It's like being an actor. We're supposed to be open and observant. And as a creator, you kind of have to be the same where, oh, that's a good idea. Write that down. Don't forget it. Because that's where our germs of stories and ideas come from, I think, if we're open to the world around us. And it can be painful and it can be hard sometimes because you see things you don't want to see out there. But then I'm also a big believer that artists are the canaries in the coal mine. And part of our job is to hold the mirror up and go, this is a problem. And how do we deal with that?
Excellent. Wow. That's a really comprehensive answer. That's brilliant. Of course, because you are. And then leading into, because I have to touch on it because this was such a joy to see and work on, and always have to say, always just an honor to be able to stand up and represent you at the festivals around the world. That was just amazing. That whole trek of time, that experience that we had together once we had known each other. But the Shakespeare Republic that you did in lockdown, were you sitting around doing this, getting anxious and not knowing, and then you said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go ahead and do this, and this is how we're going to proceed with this production? Was that kind of how that happened?
Yeah, that was interesting. So we hit lockdown here in Melbourne on, I've got to remember the exact date. I think it was March, I want to say March 10th was when it was announced of 2020. So that was a really massive adjustment. We all went through it. A massive adjustment to suddenly go, oh, I can't leave my house and I can only go out for an hour. We were only allowed an hour for a walk and there was a curfew and things like that. It was like, this is weird. And I sort of thought, all right, fine. And then I started thinking like you do. I'm like, okay, I was meant to be doing season 3. It's now season 4. Season 3 of Shakespeare Republic, which was, again, not what we ended up doing. But there was no way that was going to happen. So I was kind of left with this big gap in the schedule. I don't bake and I don't cook. Not well. So I was like, yeah, the sourdough bread thing, not going to be my thing.
Crochet?
No, terrible at all that. I can sort of sew. That's about it. And I just sort of thought, I wonder how many monologues Shakespeare wrote or soliloquies of people experiencing lockdown or prison was the first thought, and whether or not that's applicable. And so I knew Richard II obviously spends half of his play in prison, so that was one. And then I just started sort of moving through and looking at it and going, oh, there are a lot of monologues that are very applicable to what people are going through now. And as time went on, because it took a bit of time to sort of get it moving, I think I started reaching out probably towards the end of March to people and just saying, are you interested? I don't know. Are you having an absolute existential crisis or would you like to do some Shakespeare? It could be cathartic.
Or both.
You know, who knows? And it was interesting because obviously actors, as you know, actors brought pieces to me as well and said, I think this would work well for the circumstance. But it was really a case of realizing that, again, it was illustrating how universal Shakespeare can be, but also how the human condition has not really changed. In 400 odd years, we're still very much the same. And he was speaking to things like, I remember just thinking of Mark Dickinson doing his piece, Clarence, from Richard III, who talks about the nightmare that he has about being trapped underwater. And, these things were happening to people. They were having what was known as COVID dreams because everyone was so anxious. So this brief kind of, we had 24 actors in the end doing all these different pieces. And I loved your Lady M because that whole thing of being on the rooftops of New York in that really kind of ethereal, otherworldly, that's what it was like. It was weird. As you know, people were saying, particularly New York, places that are usually really, really busy and active, and you walk out there and it's dead silent.
I was able to get in the middle of the street with that steam pipe in the road, and there was like nobody, which would never happen,
Right?
So yeah, it was quite amazing. So
we could pull inspiration from everywhere about that because there was, again, such a breadth of human experience of the lockdown issue and period.
Yeah.
And also just of a pandemic, that's, and again, Shakespeare lived through 3 different bouts of the bubonic plague. So, there's reference to pestilence and death and stuff like that from things like plague. So I guess it just made sense. To me, it made sense. It was like he lived through something similar to this. At least in our country, they weren't locking our doors, and which they did in Shakespeare's England. People had plague, they would nail wood on the doors and not let them out of their house. It was intense. We didn't have that. I love
how the idea merged with the present time, but then also because of what the material was a really nice link together to just coordinate everything in a way. And now
it just made sense. And look, the thing about Shakespeare Republic, as you know, it tends to be written either, despite it being predominant, well, it is all monologues, Shakespeare Republic, they're linked by theme, or they're linked by the world that it's set in, or they're linked by a global occurrence. And in that case, season 3 was a global thing that was happening. And the fact that we shot it all like this on Zoom or on cameras or phones or whatever it was, I will give Thanasi, who was my colorist and editor at the time, huge props for saying to me, I'm not going to get a consistent color grade from all of this. Can we go black and white? And I just went, you know what, we need to go black and white. Yeah, technically it's definitely a solve, but also that then puts this series in a very historical context.
Right.
See the docos that are all black and white docos, it evokes something in the viewer to see something in black and white set in the middle of a global thing. And I do think actually we weren't sure. We had big back and forth about, is that going to distance the viewer? Is that going to make it harder to connect? But actually, I think the black and white thing is what made everyone connect so strongly to it.
Right.
So a lot of it also is working with your team and collaborating and asking the questions and kind of having those conversations when you talk about how to produce something like this. That was very much a collaborative kind of huge group effort. And yeah, it all came from me just going, I mean, look, I don't sit still very well. So yeah, that was part of the reason. Big surprise. That was part of the reason. But it was funny. At one point, I was like, oh my God, I just want to be able to bake a sourdough loaf. Like, completely so stressed at the minute. Everybody else is so cool and laid back right now. They're all really relaxed. And I'm going, my God, I've got an editing deadline. You know, it was insane. Then we did get our lockdowns. Well, we got lockdowns again in 2021. So I did actually learn how to bake sourdough. So, you know, I got my lockdown.
I remember that. I remember that was an achievement for you. So
it was, yeah.
Here now is an excerpt from Sally's original idea, Shakespeare Republic.
Thou shouldst be mad, and I, to make thee mad, do mock thee thus.
We accept of the king's mercy, but we will not show mercy upon the stranger.
Why bastard?
I could not endure a husband with a beard on his face. I would rather lie in the woolen.
Oh, fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her.
My stars shine darkly over me.
I love your son.
I follow him to serve my turn upon him.
Be copy now to men of grosser blood and teach them how to war.
Seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. Huh?
But now, I see our lances are but straws.
What is this quintessence of dust?
Women, come.
This is the stranger's case. In this, your mountainous inhumanity.
In terms of the initial ideas, creation to full production process, and in terms of having to, quote unquote, the title of this series, push, what have you found and what are you continuing to find in greater or lesser ways with the process? And this can be related to being a woman, it can be related to being in your country and not having funding or having funding, it can be related to, you know, whatever you're experiencing as a creator, the element of the bringing it to life.
The element that's a barrier to overcome. Yeah. Okay. Where do I start? Okie dokes. So firstly, in this country, in Australia at the moment, it's not such a big deal, interestingly, to be female and creating work. There's actually encouragement for that, which is lovely. What is a problem is if you're older than 35. That is a problem. And one of my things is that older women have stories to tell, guys. Newsflash. And often quite interesting stories. Also, hate to break it to you all, web series as well as normal TV, as well as film, there's a very large percentage of women over 35 going to those things. So, how about you give us that are no longer in our early 30s a little bit of a chance to tell our stories? That's all I'm going to say there. The biggest one, and it's universal, this is not just Australia, is funding. It's always finance. It just is. Australia is often, it's funny, I've heard being on panels and things with people that I quite often get, oh, you guys are so lucky, you're like Canada, you've got all this money that's available from the government. Yeah, hate to say it, it's not as abundant as people would like to think. It is a small purse. It is. And that's because, again, it's taxpayer money. Australia's not that big a country. Like, we've got, 26 million people here? We're tiny population-wise compared to everywhere else. And those purses are funded by taxpayer money. So we really don't have that much money kicking around from government funding. We have a bit, but you do need to be able to sort of find your way in there in the first place. I'm yet to do that. That hasn't happened. I will confess I haven't actually gone full on to the application for that yet because of the fact that the stuff that I'm doing hasn't quite fallen into their guidelines. But that is probably something I will have to face down the track if I wish to continue.
And even when it does, though, I have to say, just to interject, even when it does, I find that it's still not that easily accessible. I mean, the U.S. is I think, even an anomaly in terms of we have no support, very little funding and grants and what's available. And even if you do try to sometimes position something where you think the money might be accepted or coming from, or the opportunities, it's still such a crapshoot. So back to...
Always, completely. So I've done the way that we've raised money has been crowdfunding. Oh my goodness! And I know Caris, it's a thing. Crowdfunding. We have a Patreon that runs that literally keeps the lights on. So the Patreon money that comes in keeps all of our websites operating and basically pays for those. Essentially, that's what it pays for. Pays for those every year, which is a good thing. And I am not complaining. And thank you to my amazing little tiny group of Patreons people for doing that, because that is an expense that would be problematic otherwise. We have had some grants. And look, really the first time, it would have been Dark Arcadia, which is the most recent project that got released, which is part of the Shakespeare Republic universe. That did get funding. So we had money from a government grant. Oh my gosh, Creative Victoria, who deal with the arts more than screen.
That's great.
Yeah, that was extraordinary. That's never happened before. And it was literally me going, last ditch effort. I want to make this thing. It's technically a passion project. I'm just going to apply to everything that we can and let's see what happens. And we ended up getting all the grants, which was absolutely shocking. I'm not sure if it's because, right? I was like, oh, we have to make this thing now. Oh my gosh. Okay.
now you got to put it where it is, right?
Yeah, now we're going to actually spend this money. There was one point where I'm like, do I just give the money back? Like, I don't know if we're going to, and they're like, no, my God, no, you'll be murdered on the streets by everybody else who applied. Do not do that. So I think the thing I've learned is, yes, there's always going to be barriers. There's always going to be a block of some description you've got to overcome, climb over, walk around, dig under, whatever it's going to be. And it's interesting. I think it's helped me as a woman, interestingly, and as a creative who beforehand was probably a little reticent to ask in case they said no. I've kind of learned just ask, because the worst they can do is say no.
Right.
And it's sometimes not no, but just not right now. But I think, yeah, the creativity is not just about what goes on the screen, but it's about what goes on behind the scenes.
And how you get it done. It's always elements of creativity in terms of getting this past the finish line, right?
Always. Producing is a creative sport, just going to say. It in a different way to what happens with directing and writing, but it's still a creative sport in its own right. And you have to think outside the box, particularly when you're limited by funding. And I think that's what we do. I mean, it's they're the biggest barriers. And look, now, since we've had the strikes over there, And we've had the pandemic.
Right.
And so now the issue for me, the other challenge on top of the funding is rebuilding my team.
Right.
And that's a bit more scary to me, honestly, than the funding problem. I realized how lucky I had been in my cocoon with these people.
Right.
And
well,
anyway, we'll be fine.
There's a comfort level, also a trust. And also, pieces, not that you're dropping the ball, but things that need to be picked up will be picked up or attended to, or, have a second look or look after this, or, hey, you can rely on someone. Whereas new people, not that you don't trust them, but you just have to build that whole network and that relationship over again. And that takes time. It takes, effort, of course, and it takes a little bit of, can be kind of scary. Like, is this going to come through? Is this not going to come through? So,
this is it. And look, and again, it'll be fine as we go forward and do other things. We'll find that team again. But, I don't like, disappointing people, I guess. But on the other hand, I was very lucky. I just realized how lucky I was with that first team and how easily that came together, And you just go, oh, man, that was actually a dream ride. And I knew it at the time, but I really know it now. But anyway, we'll be fine. We'll get there. But it was an interesting. So my big thing my biggest thing though, it's the funding. It's always the funding.
Where does your biggest push come from, or happen?
This is such a good question. I tend to not have so much of an issue with getting the idea and putting it down on paper. Mm-hmm. That tends to be a fun thing for me to do. I think the push starts probably in pre-production when this is crazy. Oh my goodness, older sibling syndrome. When I start feeling so responsible for the whole project and all the people, and I have to be very careful not to put that pressure on myself and just know that, trust the organic process of doing that. But also keep on top of everything and know that there are deadlines and budgets and things like that have got to be dealt with, and legals and all the rest of it. The one thing, I hate budgeting. I hate it with a passion. I'm not good at numbers. I failed math. I'm like, no. And funnily enough, because I've started also editing my work, it depends on the project, but quite often, as you know, you come off filming and you just want to fall in a little bit of a heap for a bit because you need to recover. But actually there's a production suite sitting there going, no, you need to start editing now. Sometimes that can be, because it's that thing of, it's an interesting mindset. I shoot the thing, it's done, and my brain goes, you're finished.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, no, you're not. No, now you're going to sit down and craft all of that.
Now you're really going to put the story together, right?
Right. And that feels like a mountain, because I also know the mistakes I think I've made as a director in the shoot. I know the shots that I haven't got, which, to be honest, I try to get a lot of coverage, but there's always going to be that one shot where I'm like, oh, I should have got that. Why did I not get that at the time? So
that's what the pickup day is for, right?
I know, right? And I've got to be honest, I did, to the point where it didn't happen in the last one, but I have gone out with my phone and actually just going to quietly shoot this little thing here as a cutaway. And that was totally shot by our DOP. It wasn't. But yes, it is that's the thing, because then it's, again, as you know, it's a whole new medium in a way. It's a new way to tell that story, because you've told it through the lens of a camera in the moment, and now you craft it.
Right.
So that feels like a mountain. But what's interesting is that the push aspect of it, which is like, oh, just do it. Just sit down and do it. It's going to be painful to start. Just do it. Once I'm in the process of it, then I know that once I get over that initial, oh my God, this is going to be so painful, I've got to watch this stuff back and make decisions and cut the things I love. Usually there's something that's got to go. Once I'm in that flow though, it's fine, and I can power through it.
Wow. All aspects of storytelling, right?
I think for me, there's an evolution in the work that I've done, particularly with Shakespeare, which is starting with the monologues, and then Walking Shadows, which was the student commissioned series, which was the student version of Shakespeare Republic, where I started to play a bit more with scenes. Dark Arcadia is kind of the next stage, the next level of the work, where I've taken 7 of Shakespeare's texts or scenes from 7 of Shakespeare's texts and created a brand new story using his characters and his original text as written. But yeah, creating a whole new story set in a Australian high school that speaks to the Me Too movement, that speaks to the gender imbalance, and that is my contribution to the ongoing conversation around female equality in the world.
Tell me a little bit about your directing and your passion for directing and working with actors, and all the accolades on the circuit that you've received and what that's gained you, how you feel about that.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Well, to answer the directing question, I never had a real hankering to be a director. It wasn't.
Oh, come on. Really?
It wasn't. No, it was never on my bingo card.
And honestly, you've won how many awards for director? I mean, like 97.
Oh, not quite. No, not quite. But I never wanted to do it. It was not of interest. I wanted to be an actor and maybe a writer. That was it. And I literally started directing. So, okay, I made that first film in London, Little Rain Must Fall, ran 45 minutes because why wouldn't it? Anyway, it had a little bit of interest at places like the Bravo channel and BBC, but they wanted us to make more footage, like to make it go longer. And I'm like, got the budget for that? And they were like, no. And I went, okay, bye. You're not going to get that. I'm not spending my own money. Are you kidding? And then I had to come back to Australia. So that whole conversation ended. And so then I was here and I was actually teaching drama, and which was actually, I'd got a part grant to go study overseas. So part of my conditions was come back and teach what you know, which was fine. So I did. And I suddenly thought, oh, these kids need exposure to screen stuff. Maybe I'll just write a quick little short film for them, which I did. And I thought, I'll direct it. I'll just see how I go. And I had a terrible experience. I suck at this. This is not going to happen. I am not doing this again. Yep. And I left it alone for over a decade. I just went, nope, that's it. Not doing this ever again. Shakespeare Republic, when it first got conceived as the first season, was meant to have another director. And that director pulled out. And it was within a week of shooting. And I was like, what are we going to do right now? Oh, my God. And I went, all right, I'm going to have to just step up. I'm just going to have to do it because there's no one. Right? Yeah. And that was really interesting to realize the reason I'd sucked at directing earlier was A, I wasn't in the right headspace, and B, life experience is important.
Exactly.
Right? And so I went, oh, so suddenly it was.
And also maybe some confidence that you gained along the way.
I do think that was a big part of it too. Yeah. But also realizing, oh gosh, this is really exposing thought process. Anyway, realizing
we'll directing. Keep talking. We'll
put it in the trailer. When directing, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about who you're directing. And I think 20-something me was not yet feeling confident enough in my own skin to not make it about me. But when I was older, it was fine. It wasn't about me. It was about that actor and supporting them and getting them to do their best work and giving them the framework for that. So it was actually quite a fun experience, which I went, oh, that's new. And so then, we just never questioned whether or not I was directing again. I just kept doing it. And then my next challenge, obviously, was directing myself. That was the next thing, was like, now I have to direct myself. How do I mean, you know this, Caris, you know how this works. It's like, how do wow, that's a new and so it became fun because it was a challenge. Right. And it's hell out of me. And that means do it. If you're scared, do it. Because that's what you're meant to be doing.
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays of lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury. Signifying nothing.
So that was interesting for me to discover there was that ability, and what was the problem was that I was in my own way until I wasn't.
Wow, that's real. Thank you for sharing that. That's really insightful. Thank you. Yeah.
Because it's yeah. And so it was interesting because then getting it kind of ties in a way too with the success these projects found on the circuit. When we made Shakespeare Republic season 1, I didn't even know the Webfest circuit existed. I had no idea. I literally was just out there doing it for the hell of it. It was like, let's just do it and see what happens. I don't know where it's going to go. Maybe it'll go on YouTube. That'll be it. And then I don't even know how I found out. It might have been Melbourne Webfest that I first, because of course that's here in town. And I went, oh, there's festivals for these things. This is amazing. Maybe we should put the stuff in. Now, what was really interesting in that first season, we applied to just about all the Webfests around the globe and got rejected by nearly all of them.
Oh!
Yeah. And the reason given, because it was 2015, I think, and into 2016, but 2015, the reason given was you're not producing a web series, you're just producing a collection of short films.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Because it was an anthology, and there were no anthologies on the circuit at the time. And they said, no, web series are narrative stories that are episodic, and you're not doing a web series. And I was like, but it is a web series. It's stories in a collected thematic thing on the web.
Right.
How is that not a web series? Anyway, it was Melbourne Webfest. Steiner Ellenson, you get a call out as well, a shout out too. Steiner Ellenson, who was the festival director at the time, I put it into Melbourne going, we're not going to get selected. Nobody else is selecting us. We still went. They used to do a live announcement thing, so everybody would go to a venue and they would announce who was an official selection.
Yes, I love those too. I know,
those. Right? And they have a section called the Spotlight section, which is for kind of emerging creators and low budget, right? Now, normally, I didn't know this, but normally filmmakers that get announced in the Spotlight selection, because you're not in official competition, you're not actually in competition for that, get very disappointed when they get announced as Spotlight. Shakespeare Republic gets announced as a Spotlight selection, and I cheer because it's just went nuts.
Of course you should.
Steiner, who didn't know me at all, just looked across the room like, who is that random redhead that's screaming her lungs out? Anyway, he came up to me afterwards. He said, I just have to ask, you were very excited about getting selected for Spotlight. That's not a normal response. Can I ask why? And I said, because you're the first Webfest who's acknowledged we're actually a web series.
Oh, hey, yay.
And he went, I won't repeat what he said. There was a bit of swearing along the lines of, why the hell have you not been seen as a web series? Of course it's a web series. And I was like, and this is why we love you. This is why we love this festival and why we're so happy.
Well, and things shift too. things shift too when the web series were first out. You're right, it was very definitive classic web series. I shot a pilot because I knew nothing about any of this web series stuff. I shot a pilot to hopefully get it sold and produced and moving on. Film festivals, maybe, but it wasn't even a short because it didn't have a beginning, middle, and a classic end. But then I got crafty, like you said, you have to kind of explain things or do things. I cut it up into 3 episodes, which we were easily able to do. And then by the time I'd gone through a couple of years of that, just to add to your story of what you're saying, then pilots started to become in web series. They started to have pilot sections in these and in film festivals. So things shift and morph based on what we're doing. And that's why I think, as some creators have said in Hollywood, don't really ever follow the norm of what's being asked. Do your own thing. Write your story, shoot your story, tell your story in the length of time or the amount of episodes or whatever you want to do for your story. Follow trends and follow things. It's going to be here today, gone tomorrow. Things will shift, possibly, right?
100%, 100%. And what was so interesting is we went from that in 2015 to, I think it was it would have been 3rd season of Shakespeare Republic, so 2020, as part of the Web Series World Cup, being named the most successful anthology series in the world.
Awesome. And in 2018 is where Tom Chamberlain and I accepted, I believe, 2018 your award at the New Jersey Web Fest. So segueing into that world of festivals and recognition for your work, not only just the creativity, but the execution of it.
It's extraordinary. I don't take, and I know people kind of might wonder, but I honestly don't take anything for granted. You can't. I mean, you can't.
Yep.
You just can't, because there is such extraordinary talent on that circuit. And, Caris, you and I have also been on juries. Juries can be very subjective. That's natural, because they're human, humans are making the decisions. So you never know how you're going to do. And I put every project out with some trepidation about, are people going to get what I'm doing? Are they going to understand what I'm up to? So it's extraordinary to have had the response that my work's had. It's nearly a decade. It's so scary. Next year is 10 years that I've been doing this, right? Oh my God. It's a long time, but it's quite extraordinary, the amount of response that we've had to the work. But what I do know is that it's definitely helped with my confidence going forward and pitching for the next thing. That's the one massive bonus. Having this kind of awards and acknowledgement on the circuit means that I can walk into a meeting and go, well, we are award winning, and not just as a director, not just as an ensemble, which, extraordinarily grateful for the amount of acknowledgement those two aspects have got, but we've got direction and we've had awards and nominations for production design, for cinematography, for sound editing and recording.
Bravo, right.
I still love that Apulia gave me a Best Poster Award. Oh my God, I love that, because my day job is graphic design. And I'm like, yes, I can finally say I've got a poster award. But do you know what I mean? Like,
they all count. It all matters. It all counts, and it all adds up to just a fantastic experience and reward. Not just award, but the amount of reward that you gain from the creative process and from
right. And it is lovely to be acknowledged. It's always lovely for your peers to acknowledge you in that way, because it just reinforces that feeling of community and acceptance. And I think that's really important too, because we don't create in a vacuum. As much as we work independently, and creatives, obviously, particularly working in the web series world, we kind of toil away in our little corners of the world. But the thing about WebFests generally, whether you win or otherwise, or even nominated or otherwise, they create this wonderful sense of community. I mean, Caris, it's how you and I got to know each other.
That's right.
But look, it's been extraordinary. And it's also been beyond the WebFest world. I mean, I've got to say, this was pretty amazing for me. For the Lockdown Chronicles, which was 3rd season of Shakespeare Republic, to actually have a chapter dedicated to it in an Arden Shakespeare text, discussing and dissecting what we did, that was extraordinary for me.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
What the actual hell? How did that? And that's because an academic, Benjamin Broadbrib in particular, but several academics, just fell in love with the idea and wanted to talk about it. And I thought, that's amazing, because that's reaching a different segment again, who actually I thought would be the main segment for what I was doing. That'd be the main audience for academics. They're not. They're not at all by a long shot. But they came to the party, particularly with that one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much, and that was amazing for me. And to be asked to write a chapter for a Routledge publication about Shakespeare Republic, you know, that was extraordinary as well. So, yeah, again, can't take any of it for granted. And I think the other big thing for me too is not allowing all of that to feed you to the point where you become stagnant. If you're not continually pushing yourself and finding the next way to overcome the next challenge and challenging yourself, the work becomes stagnant, and then it just becomes, I think, it just can become boring.
Right.
And so it certainly doesn't have the same life. And I'm not saying you even have to change up the story or anything like that, but just give yourself an extra degree of difficulty so that you've got that adrenaline going and that spark going to overcome that next thing. Because it just means it'll filter all the way through the work, and it just feels exciting and more alive.
Exactly. It's more electric.
Yeah.
There's more
it doesn't
happening. Yeah.
Right? Doesn't have to be much. So the thing with awards, there's this saying, don't rest on your laurels.
Of course.
And yeah, that's they're words to live by as far as I'm concerned. So for me, I still haven't worked out. It sounds so crazy. I am really grateful for all of the acknowledgements, all the awards that we've received, all the nominations, all the official selections, you know, the lovely comments, all the rest of it. I've had to learn, and this I think is something that is probably important, that the one thing I think that would get in the way of it being well received is if I try to make things for those people or try to please the audience in that way. So I can't actually make the work to replicate that success, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. I can only make the work for the work's sake and then hope it lands. It lands for me, it lands for my actors, it lands for the team, and I have to hope that then it will land to that audience out there as well. And it's done to take the pressure off as well.
I was just going to say, it takes the pressure off just a little bit, so maybe the creativity doesn't get strangled, you know.
Bring your A game, but take the pressure off, because you've got to be. And my biggest thing, I mean, anyone who's come into any of my Shakespeare classes hears me say this. It's called a play for a reason.
I say that
too. Play. You've got to have that freedom of play, because that's when that freedom of being relaxed in a way about the work, in the sense of being relaxed to be a vehicle and a conduit for the work. That's where that comes from. And that, I think, as a director and also as an actor, being that conduit, you've got to be a bit loose and a bit free to be able to have that happen. So that's why the experiment tag is put on everything, so that we're just going to see. We're just going to try it and see.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sally McLean. Thank you. I love you.
Love you.
I'm
love
so
you too,
grateful that
gorgeous.
we met and are on this journey together in so many different ways, through the roads, the ups and downs, through all of it.
Yeah.
And just gratitude and love. And thank you. This has been Push, celebrating female filmmakers with Sally McLean. Thank you.
Thank you, Caris.
You're welcome.